And then I want to say good afternoon, good morning and good evening for those who are joining us from all over the globe. I'd like to welcome you to the third part of the London Summer Business Series, Scale Up Challenges. My name is Katie Keith and I'm the Executive Director here for the Global Chamber in London. And we have a great session in store for you this afternoon. So if you can unplug yourself from the email, turn off the WhatsApp and dedicate the next hour to learning some great insights today about how you can scale up your business. It'll be very much worthwhile. And as someone who has quite a few conversations every week with global business leaders who are feeling the pain points of scaling up, I think this is a great opportunity that we've got John Courtney, CEO and founder for Boardroom Advisors, with us today, supporting the Global Chamber and its members in its first summer business series to share valuable insights around how we can scale up. Good afternoon, John. How are you?
Hi, Katie. Yep, lovely to see you again.
You too, and thanks for being here. Just for those who don't know John and his global team provide real-world board advisors, part-time CEOs, MDs, non-exec directors, chairmen, paid mentors for scale-ups and SMEs. The team offers services from 1 day per quarter with no recruitment charges, no long-term commitments and interchangeable personnel. Now that means that you know exactly what you're doing when it comes to helping companies through these predicaments. So I'm really looking forward to today's session. For those on the call, we're going to spend some sort of about 30 minutes or so listening to John about the Scale Up Challenges. At the end, we're going to have lots of time for Q&A, and then we'll have a talk about what's next. So please engage with the chat. I'm here to take any questions that you need. And on that note, John, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Katie, and good afternoon. Well, it's afternoon in England, wherever you are today. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon here. So welcome. So John Courtney from Boardroom Advisors, you can see from that. And just a little shout out. We have a number of partners at Boardroom, and one of them is this outfit. Whoop. Lord's Taverners. So this is our charity partner. So just a quick shout out to them. They help disabled and disadvantaged kids through cricket, and I'm a cricket buff. And I was chair of the local region for a while, and now they're our charity partner. So okay, let's move on. I've got some slides to share with everybody. So hopefully this will work. It worked when we practiced it a minute ago, Katie. Thumbs up if you can see that okay, Katie?
All good.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, right, so we're talking about common challenges when scaling. That's today's webinar. So just a little bit about Boardroom. So as Katie kindly said earlier, we basically provide all types of part-time executive directors, be that FDs or sales or marketing or even managing directors, plus chairs and non-execs. We have over 100 advisors, very senior people. The archetypal grey hairs, I think, or forgive me, the lady members of ours who prefer not to. And clients funded startups, scale-ups particularly, and people who invest in those scale-ups, being the VCs and the private equity companies, and of course SMEs. And there's some benefits for us. Right, end of advert. So let's move on to the content. So common challenges when scaling. So we have, you see this grid chart here, and we've basically looked at the various areas of scaling up a business, divided them into 4 sections: strategy, finance, management and operations, and looked at the individual components of those. So I'm not going to go through all of those boxes, don't panic, that would be extremely boring. What I'm going to do today is just concentrate on, in our experience, the 4 major areas that people engage with when scaling up a business. Top left, strategic direction, obviously a big one. Business growth, as you're scaling up, grow, of course. Strategic funding, we need that in order to grow and expand. And then planning for exit. And those are the 4 things, 4 major areas that we cover as a business and scale up businesses often talk to us about. Now, obviously, a lot of these areas are connected, joined at the hip. You know, for example, planning for exit, it can be joined very much with succession planning. Just an example. You get strategic direction linked with business planning, these sort of things. So they're, you know, these aren't siloed boxes. They're all kind of, it's a bit like my osteopath says when I have a knee problem and he treats my back, I say, well, it doesn't hurt though. He says, strangely, it's all connected. Well, strangely, all these business elements are connected in some shape, form, or size. So we're going to cover those 4 areas, and we're going to do it backwards. What do you mean, John? Well, we're going to talk about exit first. That sounds like it's backwards. Actually, as Stephen Covey said, 7 habits of highly effective people is start with the end in mind. So we're going to start with the end in mind. So let's just have a look at exit. We'll cover this briefly because we do want to spend more time on funding, growth, and strategy, but always useful to have a look at the end in mind. So planning for exit. First of all, really good idea as you're starting to build a business, you're starting to scale. What are the objectives that you're going to have for your exit? How do you want to exit? There's lots of different ways of doing it. You know, there's a trade sale. I've done one of those. In fact, in Boardroom Advisors, we're planning to do to become employee owned. Most common of those is called Employee Ownership Trust, or EOT. There are lots of different ways in which you can exit, but having a plan at the beginning, trying to work out how and possibly when and what size and what valuation, having an idea about that as you're starting down the path of scaling the business is a good idea. Why? Because then you can put things in place as you go along. And one of the things I learned when this is business number 7 for me, God help me. So business number 6 was a digital marketing agency. And it took me 4 years to sell the business. And I had 2 cracks at it, 2 years and then a little break and then 2 years. And I discovered in the first 2 years when I was trying to exit the business, actually, I didn't have everything in place I needed in order to maximize the value that I was trying to get for the business. In fact, what I had in mind. And then I had to set about putting those things in place, a senior management team that was robust and basically that could take me and my wife and business partner out of the business, and the business could still operate. It was, you know, things like that, making sure the contracts were watertight and having a management team below us. And so there were lots of things to put into place. But if you start with the end in mind, and I must admit I didn't, then you can build to that process and perhaps not waste the 2 years I wasted at the end before I got things in place. Yeah, just look at the options, think about it, plan for it, and build it in as you go. And that's probably all I really want to say about planning for exit at the moment. There's a lot more detail on that, and that's probably for another show, Katie. That's probably just, you know, start with the end in mind. It's kind of the only place I was going with this. Funding. Wanted to talk about funding. Again, probably strategy and growth come before funding, do they? Again, they're all interconnected. So why do you need funding? If, you know, all scale ups, right? We must grow, we must get some funding in. Well, okay, what do you need the funding for? How much do you need? Again, you've got to think the thing through in terms of scale, because that the people you're going to raise from depends on the size of your raise. So if you're going to take an extreme example to illustrate the point, you're going to raise 10 million, there's no point going to business angels, because that's going to be an awful lot of angels. In order to get you 10 million, you're going to be more in VC or private equity land. If you're going to raise 100,000, there's no point in going to the VCs because they're not really interested at that stage. So the amount that you're going to raise depends on who you're going to speak to. And the amount that you raise depends on what you want to do with your money. So why are you raising? What are you going to use that money for? How long is the runway going to be that you're going to create for the business? And you want a decent runway. There's no point, again, to exaggerate to make a point, there's no point having a runway, you create 3-month runway, because it might take you 3 months to go on every round of funding, possibly 6 months. So you want to create yourself a decent runway, a year maybe. There's no right answer, but you want a decent runway. So once you've done that, you work out your target audience. So funding is a marketing operation. People often think it's all about finance. It is, of course, it's money, but it's a marketing operation. You're wanting to raise money, you're wanting to sell something, you're selling the business, you're selling it to future investors. So with all marketing things, you need to work out who your target audience is, what the messaging is that you're going to get out there, how you're going to get the message to them. We'll cover all the growth and marketing stuff in a minute, but you need to think about those areas when you're talking about funding. Who's going to be responsible for the funding? Do they have the experience? So is this going to be somebody internally? Are you going to get an advisor involved who's done it before? Corporate finance people, or an NED or funding broker? There's lots of different options. We'll look at some options in a moment. So do you need help with that? Perhaps you've already got a board advisor or non-exec director who can help. So some areas to go for funding. And I've this slide is really, it's in 2 sections really. Startups on the left, growth or scale ups on the right. You know, again, they're not siloed. There are many places that you can go for different types of funding. If you look bottom left, there's a key, and it shows purple is debts and loans, red is equity, and orange is other. If you look on the startup side of things, then there are some debt type of funding that you can get, some startup loans and business cash and asset finance if you're into, that's for big machinery generally. More likely, you may well go for equity. So that is selling shares in the business. That's what equity funding is. And then that's probably either crowdfunding or business angels. And again, they're not siloed. There are lots of angels in the crowdfunding platforms. So Seedrs and Crowdcube are the 2 big ones in the UK. There are others overseas. And then, of course, there's other. So there's grant type things. So there are some accelerators that give grants and loans. Reward-based crowdfunding like Kickstarter, and then of course grants themselves, which can be really useful, and tax grants and so on and so forth. And those are good for all of those for startups. And as you scale up, all of those are still possible, but you start to get some extra options in there. You start to get secured loans and bank loans and these sort of things, overdrafts. Just have to be careful when you're in those areas. The lenders will often ask for personal guarantees. They will always ask for personal guarantees. They nearly always insist on them, but not always. And it's a tricky path. If you give a personal guarantee, you will be personally guaranteeing a debt. And if it all goes pear-shaped, they may well come for you, your house, whatever, your goods and chattels for their money. So be very careful about signing PGs or personal guarantees, as they're called. But that's not to say that they're useless. They can be of great use. And it's certainly worth talking to your bank. And then as well as angels and crowdfunding, which is still an option with scale-ups, then you start to get into perhaps some venture capital type finance, depending on the size of the raise. And some VCs do get as low as, say, £500,000 worth of funding. Others don't start till 2 or 3 or 5 million. So it's best to do your research. Don't try and market your product, that is your company, to the wrong audience. And if you're raising 100,000, don't start pitching to VCs. Have a think about who it is, do some research, do some desk research, some internet research, and find out the level of funding at which people get involved, and pitch to those people. And don't just whack them a slide deck. Try and get in touch with somebody first, find out what the form is. You know, is there an online form? Can you speak to somebody first? Try and make a connection, connect with them on LinkedIn is always a good way. Do what you can in order to make contact before they have a look at your slide deck, is my basic suggestions. So, so that's a rather whistle-stop tour for funding. Again, Katie, that's probably one for a deeper conversation on another day, but that's kind of what I wanted to go through here. Wanted to look at 2 other sections really, strategic direction or strategy by shorthand, and then growth or marketing as the other. So looking at strategy, one of the things when we talk to, oh, sorry, by the way, I should say, if you've got questions as we go along, great, do stick them in the chat, and we'll cover them at the end. So I don't want to finish all of a sudden and say any questions and there's tumbleweed. So do stick them in the chat, and then Katie will field them when we come to the end. Right, so strategic direction strategy. So who is it in the organization who looks at strategy? How do you analyze it? Do you do it internally with the founders? Is there a board advisor or a non-exec director? Do you look at it? There's a big difference between strategy and tactics. So strategy is much more of a big picture. You know, imagine a tanker. You know, you're going from here to the other side of the world, or from here to France. You know, that's kind of strategy. It's a much bigger picture. And then the tactics is how are you going to steer around the rocks? The analogy is getting poor. Right. So we'll come to the difference between strategy and tactics a little bit later. So what does it do? Well, it gives your whole company a purpose and a direction. And I want to just do a whistle-stop tour of 3 tools, because strategy is really difficult. If you don't have a management tool, it's kind of like nailing a cloud to the wall. It doesn't work really. So you need a management tool in order to get a grip on it really. So we're going to look at 3 things. We're going to look at an old favorite, SWOT analysis has its place. It's really good. We have a new crisis assessment tool, which is ours, and most analysis, which not many people know, but I trained as a strategy consultant, and most analysis is the thing I brought away as the most practical tool from that. So all of those things, you know, strategy is about where are you now, where do you want to be, and then how do you get there? And it's the single most important thing that any advisors can help you with. It's sometimes difficult. Sometimes, you know, the phrase, you can't see the wood for the trees. If you're in the business, you're the founder, you're in there every day, you know, it's all right up here in front of you. Sometimes you need an external person to guide you through that and to help you through with the management tools. So let's have a quick look at the first one of those. So crisis strategy assessment. So we invented this because of COVID, obviously, but equally worthwhile for other crisis situations, financial crisis, God help us, World War III, whatever. So whistle-stop tour of this one. Just first of all, define the crisis in one sentence. I've got some Downloads, by the way, on the strategy here, where you can put all these in a nice place and organize them properly. So define the crisis. What is it? Well, COVID, that's obvious. And then kind of a bit like peeling back the layers of the onion. What's likely to change in the world as a result, and what's likely to change in your industry? And then go deeper again. How will it affect your revenue streams, or how might it? You don't know. We don't really know for sure at the moment, do we? But you know, there's some clues. So just have your best guess. How might it change your value proposition? We're going to come to value proposition in a minute. How might or how will this alter your customer segments and your customer relationships? And what about your distribution channels and your resources? You know, are you going to need, if you have offices, are you still going to need offices? We're very lucky at Boardroom Advisors. We're a completely virtual company, always have been, hopefully always will be. But not everybody's in that position, and you know, people are closing down offices and closing down shops and so on. So what about your cost structure? Are you going to need as many people, the same people, different people? What about your other costs? And we have all of these things. We have a crisis assessment strategy sheet. And you know, it just goes through as just a little checklist. So I'll show you how to get that in a minute. So tool number 2, I just wanted to whiz through with you, SWOT analysis. As I say, been around for donkeys, is really, really good about getting the issues out on the table and getting them discussed. Not very good about doing anything with those issues, but we'll come to that in a minute because I've got another tool to share with you. So what is SWOT? In words of one syllable, well, it's internal strengths and weaknesses and external opportunities and threats. And wise to keep internal and external in mind, otherwise it all gets a bit jumbled up. So often done just, you know, when we run sessions like this, you have a whiteboard and you write strengths and then you go around the room and you brainstorm, you know, what's good about the company, what's good about our products or services, our customers, whatever, what's good about the company, what are our strengths, and make a list. It's not rocket science, that's kind of all it is really. But you know, try not to criticize or start discussing things first up. Brainstorming rules say just get it out there. Don't worry if it's left field or wacky or whatever, just get it up and write it down. And then when you've run dry, then you can start knocking out the silly ideas or joining up one or two minor ones to make a stronger one, that sort of thing. And you do that for internal strengths, and then you do it again for internal weaknesses. What is it you go home and kick the cat about? What are your greatest frustrations? What do your customers or clients moan about? You know, all of these sort of things. Get it out of your system, get it up on the board, do the same again, don't criticize, and then knock out the silly ones and join the weaker ones into a stronger one. Opportunities and threats are external things. So external, that's outside your company. So for example, external opportunities. Now things can be both an opportunity and a threat, just like it can be a strength and a weakness. So just bear that in mind. So let's say COVID, okay? Does it create you any opportunities? It has created opportunities for some people and obviously not for others. What about the threats? Does COVID create any threats in your business? What about Brexit for those UK companies? You know, think about these sort of external issues, exchange rates. There's lots of things that are outside you. What's happening in your industry that might create opportunities and threats? So you basically now got 4 lists of things. And you kind of know the areas that you need to work on. And what I suggest in order to use the next tool is that you go through and prioritize the list. So pick perhaps one strength. What is that, it's absolutely core to the company's being that you must hang on to. Pick a couple of weaknesses that you really need to work on and to crack. Otherwise, you're going to struggle to move forward. Again, pick another couple of opportunities. What are the big opportunities out there that you want to grasp a hold of? And then perhaps one threat. What is it that really might come and bite you in the bum? And so you've got 6 things there to work with, because we're going to use another tool with those 6. That's my suggestion. So that's SWOT, and again we've got some tools so you can write these down and analyze them. So you can do them on a computer, you can do them on a whiteboard or whatever. And we'll come to how to download those in a minute. Right now, so you've got these lists. What are you going to do about them? So we actually want to make a plan of action to do things. So we're going to use most analysis, and most, as you can, if you go from bottom left and you go clockwise around, so most is mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics. And these 4 areas, they're all joined at the hip. And they lead into each other. And what you want is, from your mission, your company mission, you want everything leading to the tactics, the day-to-day tasks at the end. So whatever goes on somebody's to-do list actually helps you get to your mission. So that's the big picture on this one. The detail is you start with the mission, bottom left. What is it you want to do? And try not to be too detailed or too fluffy about this. I suggest hard business things. So I'm talking turnover and profit. Keep it simple. Turnover and profit. It's not vision. It's not we want to be the best, the greatest. Think of the business basics, turnover and profit. So you've got to, with any strategy, you've got to work out where you are now before you work out where you want to be. So what's your current financial position in terms of sales and profit? So first of all, find that information if it's not readily at your fingertips, and then figure out in a time scale what it is you want that turnover and profit to be. So picking a time scale, not as easy as it sounds. 1 year is a good idea. 3 years, another one. The old 10-year business plan type thing is kind of yesterday's thing, isn't it? You can't think that far these days. You might have 2 time scales, but let's take a year for now. So what do you want your turnover and your profit to be in a year's time? The size of your growth, the size of the mission that you're setting yourself determines the volume of stuff that you're going to do. So if, for example, you just want to grow by 5% in a year, you don't have to do much stuff. If you want to double in a year, you have to do an awful lot of things. I'm not saying what's right and wrong, it's just have a sense of scale, really. So once you've set that, and that's surprisingly difficult, everybody has a different idea around the table. People are different ages and different personal priorities and perhaps different visions for the company, but you need to get a sense of agreement around the table, because imagine you've got this tanker, if one person thinks they're going around the world, the next person thinks they're going to France, you've got a problem, haven't you? So you need to be agreed on the overall mission for the company. And then you move to objectives. What are the key things that are going to help achieve this mission? Now that's very difficult to think of in isolation. And this is we're back to the cloud, naming the clouds to the wall again. So go back to your SWOT analysis, go back to the 6 things: 1 strength, 2 weaknesses, 2 opportunities, 1 threat, just as an example, that's 6. and think about these things and convert them into objectives. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take an example. Let's say you have a weakness of perceived financial weakness. You haven't phrased that very well, but you get the idea. How do you convert that into objective? Well, you just turn it round on itself and you say the objective would be to have a greater perceived financial strength. And then there has to be a reason. Which will is a really handy phrase to have here. Which will what? Why are you doing this? Oh, well, the problem, so you go back to the problem, and the problem is because we've got a perceived financial weakness, big customers won't deal with us. That's kind of why it's a problem. Okay, right. So you turn it around as an objective to increase your perceived financial strength, which will bring us bigger customers. That's kind of the trick to do that. And that's also a sanity check on the objectives. Doesn't have to be 6. That's just an example. You'll find when you do the SWOT, you know, those numbers will fall out for yourself. My suggestion is don't try and do too many. You'll be there forever contemplating your navel. You want to crack on and do things. For each of those objectives, you need to have a look in the next box. You need to have one or more than one, I suggest no more than 2, strategies that will help you achieve those objectives. And again, it's brainstorming. So if we take the example that we just covered, increasing the perception of financial strength in the company, well, what do you do? Well, you go around the table and you've got your whiteboard and, okay, so what do we do? What are our options? So strategies really are just options. That's all it is. That's the way of unmixing strategies and tactics and mission and all these words. Think options. What are our options here? What could we do? What could we do to change the perception of our financial strength? Well, we could get a part-time finance director. Okay, that's an option. We could go and get some funding. There's 2 options I've just thought of top of my head. You might have others. So go around the room, brainstorm, get a list, and then work out which one or 2 you're actually going to try. And you might try both of those that I've suggested or others. So you got some strategies. Now, for each strategy that you decide to put into operation, you don't know it's the best strategy. You just have to make a best guess. That's kind of what this is about. But for each strategy you choose to implement, you need tactics, and that's the box bottom right-hand corner. And this is who is going to do what by when. And it makes it real, and it puts this on somebody's to-do list. So come on, who's going to find the part-time finance director? Chairman, you're going to do that, are you? Great, okay. So it's the chairman, and when are you going to do and what are you going to do? Right, and you're writing down. Okay, and that'll then go on his task list. Right, what about fundraising? Who's going to tackle that? Non-exec director, you're going to do that. Okay, how are you going to do that? Can you talk to crowdfunding, are you? Right, okay. And when are you going to do that by? Right, okay. So it's going on their task list. And then suddenly, you know, you've got some tactics. People are doing things that they're putting the tactics into action. And the acid test is, does it hang together? If those tactics work, sorry, if those tactics happen, will the strategies work? If the strategies work, will it achieve the objective? And if the objectives are achieved, is it likely you'll get to your mission? So all of them should hang together from start to finish. And that's the acid test as to whether the process is working. Stick with the process and it could well work. Right. So I find most is brilliant. Now, all of those tools, so there's the most analysis, and of all the tools, this is the one. Actually, these worksheets are really useful because they're all, it gets kind of, you've got 6 things and subsets and so on. So they're really quite handy. And you'll find this, we call it the Business Strategy Toolkit, and you'll find that on the resources section on our website. And then you just go to that page. Right. So, oh, here it is. That's what I was looking for. And this is the page itself. Does that show scrolling, Katie?
Yeah, and I've actually popped the links in the chat as well. So I've popped the links to the strategy toolkit. I've also popped the challenges to growth as well, just so people can actually get a view on some of the tools that you've brought to life today, and so they can access and have a play around with what you've got there.
Cool, thanks, Katie. So that's just the page itself, and there's download links on there, and or follow Katie's link. So okay, so that's a quick whiz through strategy. And then we're going to have a whistle-stop tour looking at the time, and we're going to have a quick whistle-stop tour of business growth. 5 minutes, thank you, Katie. A little prompt. Okay, business growth, and we do have another session on business growth. If I cut a couple of corners, then there are some videos on the Global Chamber website, and also on the Board of Advisors website, which covers this in more detail. But have a think, first of all, you know, how do you analyze growth? Do you do it internally? Do you have external advice? Think about the brand that you have. This is all really about what is it that you're selling. I always think be quite clear. I can't remember. I think it was Branson who said, you know, anybody can make things complicated, but only the clever people make things really simple. And if you want to have a product or a service, if you can't express it in one sentence, you know, the old elevator pitch, you know, if it's overcomplicated, just keep it simple, stupid, they say in old school language. So establish the brand, define the customer needs and the value proposition and the messaging and so on. We've got a little chart here. I won't cover this today, but this is a great way of finding your value proposition. The short version is 4 quarters, bottom left. Everyone has this in your industry. That's quite easy to do. What's weaker at my company? Going bottom right, and then top right. What's stronger at my company? And then top left. What's unique to my company? People find that really difficult. Sometimes people don't have anything that is truly unique, and actually, long term, that can be an issue with growing the business. So it's a useful little exercise to do that. And what you can come out with, if you have some unique things, we used to call it a unique USP, unique sales proposition, unique, oh, cracky, can't even remember what USP stands for anymore. Today, we call it value proposition. It's kind of the same thing. Really, really useful to do this for your business and try and have a headline. What's the end benefit you're offering in one short sentence, and then have some supporting points in there. I've put my stuff in there for Boardroom Advisors, but make it simple. And then you look at lead generation. This is who are you selling to? And this is all about customer segmentation and routes to market and marketing channels. And then the communication tools, how are you telling people, you know, which social media you're going to use? Are you using PR, trade shows, and so on and so forth? So just think through. These are kind of the marketing basics, I guess. So I'm sorry, I have whizzed through that really quickly. Do have a look at the video that's on our site and on Global Chamber site. What's really useful, I'd suggest, if you're interested, we have a scale-up growth diagnostic where you can self-diagnose your own strengths and weaknesses and have a to-do list. And this is on our website. It's in the resources section. And there it is again. And then this is the start of the diagnostic. Oops, let's go on to the next bit. And there is a report that comes out that gives you your strengths and weaknesses, to-do list, and so on. If you need help, then obviously we'll be happy to help at Boardroom Advisors. And if you want advisors, why use them? Short answers: outside opinion, expertise, experience, contacts, mentoring, training, releases a lot of your time. Lots of reasons to use advisors, doesn't have to be us, and qualities to look for: coaching mentality, some scale-up experience. Don't have to be experts in your sector. That's a mistake people often make. Make sure that they know about scaling up a business and have done it before, because that's really, really important. And ask around and draw up a brief for an advisor. Be clear in your own head. What is it I need? I need a coach. Why? Because I want to learn about these things. I need a non-exec director. Great. Why? I need a chairman. Yeah. Oh, yes, that's great. But why? Be really clear, draw up a brief, and then go looking for somebody that fits the brief, not necessarily, you know, a pal's dad or something. I don't know, you know, somebody you've been introduced to. They may or may not be the right. Have a brief, go and find the right person is my suggestion. Right. Phew. I kind of raced through the end. I do apologize. Do have a look at the other videos. I'm rather hoping that people have got some questions. If not, please do have a think now. Put them in the chat, and then Katie can field them. In the meantime, do please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm under John G. Courtney, a bit American, but that's separate me from all the other John Courtneys, I guess. And obviously my contact details at the bottom, website and email. No further ado, Katie, I'm kind of hoping we've got a question or two.
That was extremely insightful. Thank you for taking us through that. And I think there's something really important where you started at the exit strategy for me. And quite often, you know, there's something about being at an impasse and you become stuck and treading water because you actually don't have any place to swim to within the business. And I got that, and I got that feeling in myself that quite often if we don't have specific goals, it can actually inhibit us from scaling and moving forward. So I thought that was quite important. So I'm just waiting for the attendees to ask any questions they might have, but I do have a couple actually that I was writing down, because something you said when you were talking about the crisis management tool, you know, we're all currently experiencing some form of crisis in our business, and then we've got to think about scaling up, we've got to think about growing, we've got to think about making more money, you know, exporting or importing into different new locations around the world. So some of those bigger threats, what do you think is the biggest threat at the moment for global companies altogether, besides the pandemic, of course?
Gosh, well, there's so many, Katie. It's, you know, the threats, yeah, I mean, there are big world threats, aren't they? You know, it depends where you are in the world. You know, is it Russia? Is it China? You know, these types of global type threats. Is it cybersecurity? Is it, you know, there's lots of those big type of things. But then for each industry and each business, there are threats in there. I always say with threats, you know, start at the worst. What do we mean by a threat? Well, start with the worst, which is a threat to the very existence of your company.
Mm.
Well, that sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? But what is it that would actually knock your company out of business? You know, think the worst. What is it? Oh, crikey, well, it would be that. Well, okay, start there and make damn sure that that's not going to come and bite you. What do you need to put into place that you haven't put into place? You know, if let's make something up. It might be currency. If currency changes, you know, we import everything from America and sell it in England. But if the currency, you know, doubles or halves, well, crikey, that would wreck a whole business model. Well, okay, if that's the case, what do you need to put into place? Do you need, for example, and maybe you start with a clean sheet of paper again and a list and brainstorming, perhaps we start importing from other countries. Perhaps we start selling to other countries in order to minimize the risk of this particular one biting us and taking us out of business. Or, you know, do we have all of our, you know, do we have 50% of our sales to one customer? That's really quite a common problem. You know, that's an internal weakness rather than a threat, I know. But you know, if that's the case, what do you do? Well, the obvious answer is you find more customers. You don't try and downgrade the one you've got. You try and shovel more in the top of the funnel. So it's a smaller percentage of the overall, because if that one customer finishes the contract with you, actually is your business going to survive? So you do need to do things about that. So it's just, you know, but I would start at world crises and work the way down to, you know,
Good point there, John. And I think that it is. Sometimes we get bogged down in the big things like the pandemics, but it is about breaking it down. And you mentioned a couple of important points around just the cybersecurity. You know, that is an industry that's actually boomed through the pandemic because people are more aware about protecting themselves in this virtual environment as we're moving into a more digital age. And there's also currency is always an ongoing risk. Then you've got all the tariffs with the new trade deals that we're thinking of, and also, you know, regulatory changes as well. Brexit brings a lot of challenges for businesses. So I suppose you're right. It's breaking it down, little bite-sized pieces, and just doing a few things brilliantly to move yourself forward. Yeah. Great. Now, I've got a question that's come up. Hello, John. How long does the strategy process take? That's a pretty good question from Owen. Lovely to hear from you, Owen. Yeah, what does this take? I know you've taken us through a couple of tools, right? But in terms of the planning phase, what would you suggest a business owner would need to put aside for this?
Yeah, again, it depends very much on the size of business. If you're a one-man band and you're just starting out, how long is it going to take to work your strategy out? Well, you still need to go through processes, but obviously those processes don't take as long as if you're an established business, you know, with a board of directors and, you know, established sales force and all this sort of stuff. So partly the size of the business, but it's worth putting time aside, you know, perhaps with a, you know, let's say as a business that's, you know, perhaps it's late seed late seed or early Series A types stage of scaling up. You certainly, at the very least, my suggestion, have at least a day to have a strategy review. Bigger companies might take longer, you know, might go away for a weekend or a couple of days, stay overnight somewhere. You need enough time to work through these issues so you're not rushed. You don't want to rush through strategy. It's the biggest thing, you know, how are we going to steer this ship in the right direction? And you need, A, you need to get to the right answers, but B, you need to get everybody involved and get everybody on board. Because, you know, if the CEO or the founder is saying, right, we're going this direction, guys, and everybody else is thinking, well, actually, we want to go over here, there's a problem, isn't there? So you need to get everybody on board. The best way of doing that is to get them involved in the creation of that strategy.
Sounds like an ongoing thing. Like it's never really ends, does it?
Oh no, never. And that's a good point, Katie. So the question, the unasked question is, how often do you review strategy?
Yeah.
Again, with big companies, frequently. So things like you know, the tools that we've mentioned, those are probably annual things to do for most people. But larger companies, you know, perhaps with, you know, 20, 30 people, then reviewing the most analysis is the most critical of those things, because you've set several things in process. They're on people's to-do lists. So how's it going? You don't know that the strategies you've chosen are going to be the right ones, the best ones. You just, you know, with a best guess, that's what you as a group decided to try. So how's it going? Is it working? Well, we've been trying to get funding in and we're going nowhere. Why? Well, people don't believe in our value proposition. What do we do now? Well, perhaps reassess our value proposition. You know, so reassessing what you do on a regular basis is really, really essential. And if, you know, the couple of things that you've tried to do haven't worked, well, this is the great thing about the most analysis. It gives you somewhere to go without just screwing up a bit of paper and throwing it away. You can go back a stage. Well, okay, those were the strategies, the options that we looked at doing, and they're not working. So what do we do? Well, what other options did we talk about? Okay, let's look at 3 and 4 on the list. You know, with hindsight, do those now look like the best options? Or actually, are there some new options that are coming out? Regular review means you're always regularly looking at your strategy and moving forward.
Yeah, I feel it's an ongoing thing. But John, on that note, I think we've had our questions, and thank you very much for answering the questions I had today as well. I wanted to say thanks again for your time. We do have another part of the series coming up. I've just popped it into the chat bar, and I know other people are going to be chiming in to watch this session as well. So July 22nd at 4 p.m, we're going to be talking about building up boards and advisors. And what I think this does, it brings everything together. All of the things we've discussed over this series is really, as you say, you know, your hip bone's connected to your knee bone. And so the scale up challenges are connected to the board and how you operate the business. So I'm looking forward to finishing off the business series on that topic. And so before we close completely, so thank you very much for everybody who's attended today and for those who will be listening in later on. And John, it's been lovely to have you supporting us in the Summer Business Series. I'm looking forward to next time. And for those who don't know much about Global Chamber, we are the first and only chamber of commerce of our kind in the world. We are in over 525 metros. We are pretty much everywhere. We get the challenges that you're facing on a day-to-day basis. We're here to help you grow and thrive in uncertain markets. So please reach out. And to me, I'd love to have a conversation with you about how I can help you. And also, I'm going to do a little plug of my own. We're having our first monthly London meetup next Tuesday at 4 p.m. We're opening it up to guests and non-members. I'm popping the detail in the chat right now. I'd love for you to come along and celebrate with us and do a bit of networking. And on that note, thank you again, John.
Thanks, Katie. Lovely to see everybody.
Okay. Goodbye.